Snatch Game has become one of the most anticipated challenges on every Drag Race season. Well, okay, I shouldn't really say has become, as I believe it earned its iconic status after season 6 of Snatch Game, which to this day is still the highest rated episode of the show. It's no surprise that this is the case, as for pretty much every season, not you, we're left with iconic performances that are often referenced in the LGBTQ circles, whether the quotes we quote actually came from the celebrities the queens impersonate, or they're just things that the queens come up with themselves. Now, some queens got to do Snatch Game twice, or in Ginger's case, thrice, with the challenge's inclusion on All Stars. Today, we're going to be looking at those instances when the queens did Snatch Game on their regular seasons and on All Stars, and analyzing a couple of things. First, we're going to be looking at who had a glow up, who had a dim down, sure, why not, let's call it that, and who plays the same both times that they played Snatch Game. Next, we're going to be looking at which season overall had the strongest pre-season placements, and then, as a direct comparison, which cast overall showed the most improvement. Lastly, we're going to look at an overall table of placements pre-All-Stars and on All-Stars, and trust me, you might want to see that, as some of the information I gathered from it is pretty interesting. But first things first, I have to do the standard YouTube speech about how the algorithm keeps the channel alive and how subscribing, liking, or disliking, and commenting under the video helps the channel out a lot. Wink wink nudge nudge, you don't have to do any of that, I'm not your mom. Alright, let's establish a couple of things first. Due to not playing Snatch Game on their original seasons, and thus us not being able to compare to the original, this video will not include the Snatch Games of Bebe, Zahara, Benet, Trixie, Mattel, India, Ferrah, Blair, Clair, and, sadly, legend Raja O'Hara. Next, as regular seasons and All-Star seasons have different formats, and as All-Star seasons in general between each other have different formats, we cannot look at the classic point systems I use. This time, we have to simplify the placements a little. So we'll have 5 tiers: win, high, safe, low, even though the lows are pretty rare, and up for elimination, just abbreviated to UFE. For All-Star seasons that have a top 2 lip-syncing for their legacy format, the top 2 will here be counted as win. Same goes for the up for elimination queens. We won't look at who got eliminated, as in pretty much all seasons and all episodes. Who gets eliminated is not down to the challenge. That's kind of part of the show. Even if you are the worst in a challenge, you still can save yourself or be saved from elimination. Now, of course, some All-Star seasons have 2 winners of a challenge, thus a top 2, and some have only 1. That's true. But All-Star seasons also have sometimes a bottom 3, bottom 4, bottom 5, so trust me, it all balances itself out in the end. Oh, and also, by the way, I did not use the bullshit placements for All-Stars 5 and All-Star 6 Snatch Games. We don't acknowledge those here. Let me continue showing you the methodology behind this video with All-Stars 2's queens. So, pre-All-Stars 2, this cast had 2 winners in Tatianna and Ginger, 3 high queens with Alaska, Katya, and Roxxxy, 0 safes, 2 lows in Alyssa and Jaremi, and 1 queen that was up for elimination in Detox. You already know the results of All-Stars 2 Snatch Game. If you don't, you can check the scoreboards in the videos that I left in the description for each season that will be mentioned in this video, with exact explanations behind placements. So what do we do with this information? Well, first, let's see who went up and who went down with their placements. In alphabetical order, Alaska went up by 1, as did Alyssa. Detox stayed the same. Ginger regressed 2 spots, while Jaremi progressed the same amount. Katya went up by a spot, whereas Roxxxy and Tatianna had a drop of 3 and 4 spots respectively. When we add up all of these together, we get a -4. Now we'll get back to that later. Then I did this with all other seasons, and now let's see who had the biggest glow up. 2 queens share the distinction of having the biggest glow up between their regular season Snatch Game outcome and their All-Stars outcome. Now, can you remember who those queens are? Well, I think you can remember that Kylie is one of them, given that she went from being up for elimination on season 2 to being high on All-Stars. So that's a 3-spot progress. Another queen had the same fate as her, and that queen is Naomi Smalls. The only difference between the two is that Naomi was able to win her bottom two lip sync, but as I have already said, that has nothing to do with the Maxi Challenge. And who went down the most? No pun intended. Yet again, we have two queens here in the spot. Tatianna and Kennedy Davenport. They both have the distinction of being winners of their original season's respective Snatch games, Tatianna being the first winner of Snatch game, and then both being up for elimination on All-Stars, with the only difference being that Tatianna did end up as the eliminated queen. Let's also mention the queens that did not change their placements between the seasons, for better or for worse. Starting from the worse, we have Gunn, who was up for elimination both times she played Snatch game, and who got eliminated both times. And then also Detox, who, unlike Gia, was not eliminated either one of the two Snatch game episodes. Next, Alexis Mateo placed high both times she played Snatch game, while BenDeLaCreme and Ginger Minj both won 2 Snatch games. Albeit, yeah, Ginger won only 2 out of the 3 Snatch games she competed in, making Dela's record more impressive. This section of the video is hopelessly devoted to the preseason placements, and of course, checking which cast went into the Snatch game with the most to lose, meaning who went into it with the best placements beforehand. Okay, how are we doing this? Simple. We have 5 spots, the lowest spot will give its cast 0 points, everything above goes up into increments of 1. Again, let's take All-Stars 2's cast as an example. Even though there were supposed to be 9 contestants there, we count 8 queens. This next part might get a little complicated, so stick with me. Let's imagine that all of them did as great as possible originally. That's the ideal situation. We have 1 queen from season 2, so that means we have 1 contestant who won Snatch Game that season. Same goes for the contestant from season 4. With the 4 contestants from season 5, it gets a little complicated. Imagining that they were the top 4 of that episode on season 5, and looking at the original distribution of placements for that episode, it means that ideally these 4 were the winner, the 2 highs, and 1 of the save queens. And lastly, for season 7, given that there were 2 winners there, the 2 queens we have here from that season ideally would have been the winning pair. That means that in an ideal situation, this season would have had 5 Snatch Game winners, 2 high queens, and 1 safe queen originally. Once we assign the pre-agreed on points to those placements, we see that this All-Star season's ideal preseason maximum is 28. Now, given that in reality we had 2 winners, 3 high queens, no safe queens, 2 low queens, and 1 queen that was up for elimination, these 8 queens altogether got 19 points, meaning that All-Stars 2's queens have 67.86% of the ideal situation. Let's call it that. For All-Stars 3, it's a little simpler, as the 5 queens we're looking at are all from different seasons, thus their ideal score is 20, meaning that in an ideal situation, all 5 of them were Snatch Game winners. And with their 2 wins and 3 saves, they have 14 points, or 70% of the ideal situation. For All-Stars 4, the ideal is 30. The 8 queens that competed on that season's Snatch Game only have a score of 11, which is just 36.67% of that score. All-Stars 5's ideal is 16 points, and the 4 queens competing got an 8, so only 50%. And lastly, for All-Stars 6, those queens reached 63.16% of the ideal. This means that, going into All-Stars, the cast with the best preseason placements is the All-Stars 3 cast, followed by All-Stars 2, then All-Stars 6, then All-Stars 5, and lastly, All-Stars 4. Now, the success rate list is a little different in reverse. Given that the queens of All-Stars 4 had the most to gain, and they did, they overall had the biggest glow up, followed by All-Stars 5. All other seasons regressed. All-Stars 3 and All-Stars 6 sharing their spot, but not being as bad as All-Stars 2. Before we go into the final table of this video, let's look at this. So, 30 queens played Snatch Game more than once. 5 were original winners, and 5 were originally up for elimination. 10 queens were safe, 7 of them were high, and 3 low. From this, if we were to project onto the future seasons, we can say that you have a higher chance of being cast on All Stars and reaching that season's Snatch game if you did well on your original season Snatch game, as almost 3/4 of the Snatch game's 2 or 3-time players placed safe, high, or won. And now, the table. So, let's start from the wins. What this shows us is that if you won Snatch Game originally, you have the highest chance of either winning it again or of being up for elimination. Now that makes sense. You have to either live up to the expectations you set up for yourself, or you're most likely going to be up for elimination. The queens that were originally high are all over the place here, so it's anybody's game really. Now, what I find interesting is that out of the 10 queens that were originally safe for their Snatch games, not a single one of them was safe again. The lows, just like the highs, are kind of negligible, but if we look at the queens that were low originally and that were up for elimination originally, we can say and assume for any future All-Star season that a queen that was below safe cannot win Snatch Game. And if we also include the queens that played the Snatch Game for the first time on All Stars, well, you're in danger, girl. Because you're going to be safe, low, or up for elimination. And that's it. That's the video. Okay, to be perfectly honest with you, there is no point to this video. These are just some stats that I wrote down because I needed them for my Heroes vs. Villains fantasy season. And then I was like, well, you know what? Let's make it a video. Maybe somebody will find it interesting. Thank you for watching.